Welcome to the Lair of Secrets podcast, the podcast about gaming and being a geek by two middle-aged geek dads. I'm Ken Newquist, and I'm having a lot of trouble believing that summer is almost over.
I am David Moore. I have been doing a lot of summer reading, more gaming than I have in literal years, and I've been looking forward to seeing what our minions have done to refurbish the lair between our seasons.
That is right. Season three, right?
Inaugural episode of season 3. Sort of. There was like an interstitial episode yesterday because I thought we were recording yesterday, but forgot. Even didn't look at my calendar or whatever. So I ended up streaming my building of a Tailspire map instead. Going, where's Ken? I don't know where Ken is. Even though we'd talked about that already. But you know,
lost in time and space.
Yep. It being first episode of season 3, thought we'd get caught up a little bit with what's been happening end of summer, end of my con season. Don't know if it's the end of your con season, Ken.
I didn't have a con season, okay, David.
All right. My con season consisted of GenCon, so that was it.
It is more of a con season than I had, so Have at it.
A couple of things happened at GenCon. I had applied for us to have a media badge, a press badge at GenCon, and they said, we'll put you on the waiting list. And then a couple weeks later, they said, hey, by the way, you're press. And I was like, oh, really? Okay, great. I've been there as press before for the old Game Master show. Have not been there as press in several years. And it was interesting this time. They had a couple of bad experiences with they used to let press into like the Great Hall where you can buy things and stuff like that. They used to let press in early so they could have interviews where it was more quiet and more people were still setting up but could talk, that sort of thing.
Right.
And there were some people who had press credentials that were like, oh, I could buy tons of stuff here without lots of crowds around. And that was no bueno. And so they no longer allow that. So that was a bit of a disappointment. I was able to hang out in a couple of different areas that I hadn't before. I spent a lot of time at the Writers Symposium this year. Friend of the show, Matt Forbeck, and a couple of other people. Crowd there is not quite back to the pre-pandemic like highs of 70,000, but there were a good 50,000 people there. Wow. This year they had last year they had a mask requirement. This year they also had a mask requirement, but since it's been long enough, unfortunately COVID is still around, they also had a vaccination requirement. So you had to go in and show your proof of vaccination and your ID and stuff like that, and they gave you a wristband that you needed to wear all weekend. Seemed like everything went pretty well with that. I thought that was going to be crazy trying to get that wristband. It took me longer to walk through stanchions that zigzag back and forth than it did to show my two cards and then go hold out your wrist and they put the thing on. So was not hard at all. And it seemed like 50,000 gamers were okay with that. So that was really nice. Again, the Writers Symposium was really good. Got me more inspired to write again. See if it sticks is my problem.
So what is the Writers Symposium? Because I never did this.
Good point. I should probably explain what the Writers Symposium is. So the Writers Symposium is a group of professional authors that are different. A lot of there are some that are regulars that come back year after year, but there are some that rotate in and out. And I started going. I checked it out last year, the year before last. It was interesting. It was fun. It talks about the craft of writing, the craft of getting published. There's a wide range of different talks that you can go to, hosted by different people. I already mentioned Matt Forbeck. Thank you. But like Michael Stackpole was there. R.A. Salvatore was there. Several other authors that I can't remember all their names were there. And from a wide variety of not just all fantasy or science fiction, but also a couple of other genres. But all of these authors also enjoy gaming. There are also some authors that came from, I'm going to call them authors because most of them have at least have published some books, but they also are video game writers as well.
Oh, cool.
Unknown to a lot of people outside of the writing craft, if you don't hit it and are able to consistently sell books, it is not a living wage. You know, you don't sell your first novel and go, I'm retired, you know, unless you sell millions of copies, which hardly anyone does. So video games and screenwriting and script writing, those that's where the money's at if you are an author and you really want to make being an author your job. And so there was a lot of people there who have done that in the past, and it was good to hear all of that. It was good to hear all about the craft. It's not creative writing class. It is much more on the business of it, but there is the occasional advice on how do you get your ideas, which is like one of an author who is on a panel like that is like the worst question, yet the most often asked question ever.
Right.
And because if you're having ideas, you don't necessarily take the time to think about how you have those ideas. You already have them. But if you don't have those ideas, you don't know the process to get them, you know, to kickstart your imagination.
Right.
So, but there were some panels along those lines, but that was not all I did at GenCon. I also played a couple of games of Sparks, which is the Star Wars living campaign that's been going on for, I believe, a quarter of a century now.
Oh.
So
wow.
Yeah. So it is West End Games Star Wars, which could be considered like the very first edition of a Star Wars role-playing game out there. It's still a good system. It's a D6 based system with the wild die. I think a couple of other systems have grown out of it since then. That is one of the books. Yep. That is the second edition of that book.
Yeah, I can do this now.
Yeah.
Yes. Second edition.
There's a slightly better edition than that. If you're looking for rules clarifications, which is a second edition revised and expanded.
Gotcha.
But if you join Sparks, like, dear Lord, there's like a binder this thick of like, I mean, that group has been going for 25 years. And a lot of questions have been asked and a lot of other things have happened. I have wanted to kind of wipe the rules back. Sometimes there's just too many rules.
Right. With
a living campaign, you know, sometimes you need that because you can't run it like a home campaign.
Right.
But it was a lot of fun. I saw a lot of friends that I see at Gen Con or at other conventions that play Sparks, and it was good to see all those people. Finally, I actually didn't buy a whole lot. I did get this. I don't know if it's right way up or not, but it's my Muad'Dib and the Fremen concert shirt.
Nice.
And it's got all their locations that they've visited on the back. I got that and a couple of others. I made a deal with Erin that for every t-shirt I got at Gen Con, I would get rid of 2 old ones. She was happy for that.
So you know, it's been so long since I've been to Gen Con. I haven't been to Gen Con since I think 2014. And so I haven't really acquired any more t-shirts, right? Like I have generically geeky t-shirts that you get at like Old Navy or whatever, right? Like I've picked up over the years, but not like the very niche kind of t-shirts that you could get at Gen Con.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And this was an interesting little shop. And we could probably put it in the show notes, but like what attracts people to the shop initially is they have these window clings for like the side lights, like next to your front door if you have a house.
Okay.
The little rectangular windows, and they're all stained glass looking. So they're window clings, but they all look like stained glass cutout stuff. So we have like Princess Leia done up as kind of like a religious figure. I've got what is it? I've got the Falcon. and I've got like 5 of them right now. And then there is a gamer's welcome with a big stained glass looking D20. But unfortunately, their window clings are wider than my windows. They're for like a wider side. So
right.
5 of them, I was able to slice off the left and right, and it still fit. And then it fit perfectly, and it looks good. The D20 did not. So I put it on another window. But that's also where I got this shirt. We're gonna order an Obi-Wan Kenobi is being sent to us. So we'll have that to fill in our 6th side light there. So it's balanced, balanced to the Force.
As one does.
And but one last thing I wanted to say was our Talsorian Games, who make Cyberpunk RED and Mapcon and several other games with the interlock system, which I hadn't heard the name interlock system in years and years and didn't realize it was still being used, but it is they had what they called a cozy chat, which is normally like, hey, if anybody wants to go out to the bar, we'll be there so that you can come out and chat with us. But being COVID, you're not going to go out to the bar and have your masks off. So they had a little room, and we all, there's some other fans, gamers, sat down, and I actually had a really good chat with James Hutt, who is their lead designer at our Talsorian Games right now. Had a really interesting chat, talked enough about it that at the end of that, I was like, can I buy Cyberpunk RED and the Tales from the Red module book? Plonked down a lot of money. But they're also part of Bits and Mortar. So I also got the PDFs about 2-3 weeks after GenCon. I got a copy of the PDFs as well as the physical books, which is nice.
Very, very nice.
But he gave me his card and said, because I mentioned, I was press, I was with Lair of Secrets, and he's like, hey, pulls out his card, writes his better email address for me to get a hold of him onto it, and says, hey, if you want me on the podcast, I love being on podcasts. So we may have him on in season 3. But I understand nice. You did have a con season. It may not be GenCon.
No, I will have a con season.
You will have a con season. Okay.
Yes.
So tell us about this.
MEPACon is our local regional convention. It's taken place primarily in the Poconos. It actually started off in the Lehigh Valley. So the Lehigh Valley is Easton, Allentown, and Bethlehem. Allentown, like the Billy Joel song. We're like 2 hours north of Philadelphia, hour and change west of New York. And then the Poconos is above that, right? So, honeymoons and all of that if you're from the Northeast. And so it's basically the legacy of all these great little regional cons that we used to have back in the day, like Lehigh Con and VogleCon and what have you. And they've had it in Scranton. They had it in Clark's Summit. They had it in a couple of different locations up in the Poconos, which for me means it's somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour away. So getting there became, you have to get a hotel room, which isn't a problem, right? Like, we get a hotel room, we hang out, a bunch of us would go from the Black Razor Guild, and it's good. But now it's moving to the Lehigh Valley, which means it's going to be in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania at the SureStay Plus Hotel, which I've probably driven past it, but I don't actually know where it is. So it goes from being 45 minutes. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. You were about to say what I was going to ask. So
it goes from being like 45 to 60 minutes away to being like 15. Right, like I can just jump in the Jeep, drive over to Bethlehem. Could stay there. I could also just commute from my house. Like it's great.
15 minutes is like GenCon is 30 minutes from my house, and we commuted every day. It would be nice if it was a shorter commute. If the hotel prices weren't so expensive, and then I might actually be tempted to stay overnight. 15 minutes would be just amazing. Yes.
And so it would be pretty cool. It's a small con, over the years it's ranged from like 100 to 200, maybe 250 at its height. It's been smaller in recent years because of COVID. They only just started meeting again, I think within the last year. Okay. So hopefully being in the Lehigh Valley, I suspect it may draw more, because a lot of the gamers that I know it's like the Lehigh Valley is just a metropolitan area. We've got a lot of people, more so than I think up in the Poconos. So I'm looking forward to it. I did actually. I take it back. I did have a con this summer. It was HardyCon. I don't think we talked about this on the last show.
I don't think
It's
so.
been a long time. It's been a long time since we recorded.
It is true.
One of my friends decided that he wanted to get a bunch of us back together again and game in the real world. We've all been itching to play in the real world. And so he rented 2 hotel rooms and we got together and we gamed pretty much all day Saturday. So we actually got together on Friday night and kind of like hung out and did some stuff and just like chatted and caught up. And then
awesome.
We went and played a lot of Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Nice.
And Castles and Crusades.
Nice.
Which was fantastic. So
I got to know with Dungeon Crawl Classics, did you just run the zero level funnel or did you get like beyond first level?
We ended in we ended at first level. We only did the first level funnel. Okay.
Yeah, I have.
So we had one person who had never played before. So
I've never progressed beyond 0 level. Like I've had characters survive Dungeon Crawl Classics, you know, like but have never played subsequent adventures with them.
And the other cool thing that we did is, I almost forgot to mention this, on Friday, a bunch of us went up to the Poconos and we went to the Frank Frazetta Museum. So there's a small museum outside of Strasbourg. It's really small, and I think his son gave us a tour. Like you can pay for the tour, and it was like $15-$20 or what have you, right? And so he walks you through like what it was like living with his dad. I mean, like, and he had like these different, just talking about how his dad worked, right? And like, you know, not unsurprising, I think, when it comes to creatives, right? Like he would have these times where he had a deadline and he just wasn't painting, and then like paints in a mad frenzy and like sends it off the day it was due, right? You know, throwing out, like painting over old canvas, and his son's like, what are you doing? That's great. And he's like, you know, I got this deadline, I got to get this thing done. He's like, I will go buy you more canvas.
Yes.
Right? So it was really cool. You know, it's worth stopping by if you have the opportunity. It's very small, but it's got like a lot of his original artwork, and it was cool to kind of like get the background behind it. Like, you know, it got those classic Conan covers, right? It's just it was cool. So we got together and we played, you know, a bunch of different games, and it was fun.
Cool. Very cool.
So I am looking forward to MEPACon being close, because there's a number of us who are here whom I haven't been able to see in a while, and I suspect they will all want to go to the con. It gives me a chance. MEPACon has always been the place where, like, I don't usually run D&D. I'll play Savage. Like I will run games just so that I can run something different. So I'll run Savage Worlds. I'll run maybe I'll run Dungeon Crawl Classics, right? Games that I want to play. That's where I've been able to play them, is at MEPACon. So I'm looking forward to the move.
Nice. The last time we talked, we did go over our summer reading list.
Yes.
The minions have been doing work in the lair on our library stuff. You've been talking online about RPG a Day. So tell us about RPG a Day and what you've been talking about.
Yeah, so RPG a Day is in its 9th year, and so it's basically kind of a postfest sort of thing that a bunch of different bloggers are participating in. I have to say I've been posting more than I've been reading. I feel bad about that, but August was kind of bonkers. But it's cool. So basically each day there's a prompt, and then you write about that particular prompt. So examples are like, what is a great introductory RPG? When were you first introduced to RPGs? What would be your perfect game? Suggestion Sunday, recommended game to friends. So like I talked about Mutant Crawl Classics. And so it's cool. It's inspired some conversation on Twitter, both on the Lair Secrets account and on my Nuketown and Nuke Havoc accounts, which has been nice. I mean, that's part of it, right? Like, is the community and being able to talk about these things, reminiscing, and getting new ideas, right? Like people pitch different things as you're going along, and you're like, oh, well, wow, I should totally check that out. In the last 2 years, I tried to do it, but I had a hard time with it because they did one-word prompts, like brave. And I don't know, I would just get a mental block trying to write about brave, right, or curious, right? Whereas if they ask you a question, it is much easier to just give them an answer, right? And they can get a little repetitive, they kind of, there's definitely a theme to it, right? So it's like, what would make a great introductory RPG? Where would you like to run an introductory game? Who would you like to introduce to games, right? But I think it was good to get like different opinions from different folks and to see what was out there. So I'm a little behind. I have a few more. I have a few posts queued up, but I needed to get up here to get books to take pictures for the featured image on Nuketown. So that was my procrastination. I wasn't able to make it upstairs because we had a house guest who was had taken over my office and game room.
Right.
Which very lovely person. It was one of my daughter's friends, but it meant that I did not have access to my game room for 2 weeks, so it was a little more challenging.
Gotcha. Well, I mentioned this earlier, was after checking out our Talsorian's, cozy chat setup, picked up Cyberpunk RED and Tales of the Red. They're basically their module source book. And after I started actually with the Tales of the Red module book. One of the piece of advice, I can't remember where it came from, which is annoying, but was, if you want to know how the designers or the company of the role-playing game would like you to play the game, read the modules that they publish.
Right.
That doesn't mean you have to play them, but it sets the tone for what that setting and how those rules should kind of go off. For instance, we've been playing a little bit of Spelljammer, like their prequel stuff, and there's a fair amount of serious, but also a fair amount of silly in there as well. But in terms of Cyberpunk RED, I was really impressed with how little text they were able to use to make a really solid adventure. And I'm not talking like 2 or 3 things. It was like, I think it's 6 or 7 total pages, but there's a fair amount of role playing in it. There's a couple combats in it, cause it's Cyberpunk. And there's a lot of investigation stuff in it, / planning. Something that Aaron might be interested in, as opposed to like Scum and Villainy, where it's like, no, you don't get to plan. You plan retroactively. And so this is kind of like the flip side of that. It's like, you should plan ahead. You should investigate. You should dig into details. And given what I've heard about like Call of Cthulhu, it would kind of like fit in that same bucket for me.
Okay.
And I was really impressed with the writing of it as well. Like, it's very evocative for as few pages as they have in that module. Normally I've seen modules that are 30 or 40 pages that are not as good as these 6 or 7 were. So it reminded me as well why I enjoyed Cyberpunk in the past. I used to play a lot of Shadowrun. Never picked up Cyberpunk because I was like, man, Cyberpunk's cool, but Cyberpunk plus magic is even more cool. And then reading Cyberpunk RED and the history they have in there. I don't know what the original Cyberpunk 2020 was, how it was written, but I really like the history that's behind this, and it does not need magic. And so it's been, I like it. I like it a lot. I'd like to play it, and or run it sometime within this next year. Like, the history seems like it could have happened. Like, it's an alternate history. Like, right now we'd be in the midst of Cyberpunk because it's,
gotcha.
The original was 2020. Like, we're 2 years past that. But like in some video games, like in Prey, the Prey video game, I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not, but like some video games have an alternate history that, like Fallout branches off from our history in probably the 50s or 60s. And so they're a different technology base and a different political structure. And this is kind of the same sort of thing, is like things drifted apart around the 1980s.
Right.
And so it's really neat seeing that in the way that it works right now. I think Cyberpunk Red is set. I haven't dug in far enough to figure this out. I think it's slightly before the Cyberpunk 2077 video game. But you could just as easily set it during the same time. So I don't know. I want to put it on our list of games to play. So
yeah, I'm definitely curious after you've talked about it. And I went out and researched it a bit. You're right. Like they talked about it landing in between Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk 2077. So it's cool. Like to your point, I think I was in the same headspace with Shadowrun, right? Like I had just read Neuromancer and like, oh, this is great. But and for me, I don't know that it was a conscious choice. I don't think I even knew that Cyberpunk existed. I think it was probably because there was no internet. Ladies and gentlemen,
but you had to be in college and on Usenet user groups or whatever.
I'd have to be paying way more attention to Usenet than I was at the time.
Yeah,
right?
the marketing. The marketing back then was go to your local game store or go to Walden Books or B. Dalton, which no longer exist. Go to your local bookstore and it might be there. And
I was in Lock, right?
Yeah, and
go ahead.
I know the other reason why I picked up Shadowrun is probably because it was in those stores and Cyberpunk 2020 was not. It might have been in game stores because I know I saw physical copies of it, but it was also made by FASA, who made BattleTech, and I'm always been a huge fan of BattleTech. So it's like, oh, FASA, okay, yeah, I'm picking up Shadowrun.
Right. And I went to college in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, which is this tiny little town. Great town. I mean, I loved my time in Lock Haven, but it was small. It's next to State College, which is where Penn State is. And so maybe a handful of times in my whole time at Lock Haven did I venture to State College. And one of those times was to go see Highlander 2. So, I didn't go to the bookstores to check stuff out. So it was kind of just like word of mouth and what you had around campus. And I think the Mosaic browser, like the first time I ever saw it was in 1994, which is the year I graduated. So now that we've fully dated ourselves, I'm totally down with playing some Cyberpunk. I think it would be a lot of fun. I'm sad that I was not able to run. I don't have anything capable of running Cyberpunk 2077.
Well, you were going to check out, I think, the NVIDIA thing.
Yes, this is true.
And you could probably use that. But yeah, I haven't picked it up for a while. I never finished it. I didn't run into all the bugs that lots and lots of people on the internet ran into, but I probably should pick it up again after all this. Probably after November is what I'm thinking, because I got a lot of stuff between now and November that is just going to eat up my time. So I want to, but I'll probably pick it up maybe over Christmas break or something. I'll pick it up again and play it, but I'd rather play Cyberpunk Red than a video game personally. But
yeah, no, I can see that. I got distracted by a bunch of video games over the summer too, but that's not for this episode. Maybe that'll be episode 2. All
right. Okay. We did have one thing. The Minions unearthed our loot locker. And this is a new thing. So they unearthed it, and our friends John and Laura over at Omnihedral, who are in Baltimore area, Savage Mill, actually, Maryland. They run a game shop. So Omnihedral is a game shop, and I was visiting during Free RPG Day, and they had gotten a lot of product, but not all of it had gotten snapped up by the end of that weekend. And so as I was leaving, I was like, hey, can I take some of this and, go ahead and give it away to some of our listeners. So we have a couple of things like Level 1, which is a free RPG day. It's an indie RPG anthology. So this is like 1 or 2 page RPGs. And it's a fairly thick book from it. I know a few of the authors in here and a bunch I don't. So there are, it's and it also kind of gives the idea, like there are some games that talk about things like the X card or lines and veils or things like that. This actually also gives all the rules for those, if you were wondering what those were. I also picked up Homeland Revelations, which I believe is based on the video game. So this is their really thick, fairly thick quick start. Their quick start is 63 pages long or so, and a bunch of nice color pre-made characters to go with it. Then we have the Root role-playing game. It is their quick start, which is also pretty beefy, at like 32, 33 pages, but it's like a full 8.5 by 11 sort of size, based on the board game. We've got several copies of each of these, and more. So we have A Familiar Problem, which is from Darrington Press, which is the Critical Role gaming arm of Critical Role. We've got stuff for Starfinder and Pathfinder. They have the Skitter Warp and A Fistful of Flowers, which I understand is every RPG day, free RPG day, they have, like for Starfinder, it's always Skitter based, and I think it's similar for Pathfinder as well. We have Epic Encounters, Bridge of the Dwargar Cult. I don't know who that is from. I don't know if it's from a particular game. It's SFG. It has a very similar art style to Morkborg, but I don't think it's related to Morkborg.
Gotcha.
It's Epic Encounters is their designed to take your fantasy role-playing games to the next level. So I think this is kind of like a module and or it's a set of modules and encounters in a Dorgar cult. So, and then you were talking Dungeon Crawl Classics. We have Danger in the Air. So your poor 0-level adventurers, your 4 or 5 0-level adventurers get to go through Danger in the Air. From what I understand, especially from this cover, is you could probably run it as a Mutant Crawl Classics level 0 as well. And then finally, we only have one copy of each of these. We have an Iron Kingdoms one, and then the 3 Wizard Conundrum adventure module. So this is a level 3 adventure module. This is a 5e compatible, but it's set in the Iron Kingdoms. So from Privateer Press, which is the makers of the minigame, the Skirmish minigame. I'm trying to remember what the name of it is. But it's set in the Iron Kingdoms, which is where that Skirmish piece comes from. That same Skirmish game comes from, where you basically play like steampunk mecha.
Oh, cool. Was it War Machine?
War Machine. That is it. Yes.
Power the internet.
Yes. So if any of you want to get your hands on these things, what you and one of our Twitch viewers did just pop in with War Machine as well. Thank you, Chris. If any of you want to get your hands on some of this, it's kind of a first come, first served basis. What I'll do is I'm going to bundle up one of everything that I can. And if you go out on Twitter and tag @Layer of Secrets in it, as we see these come in, Ken or I will contact you via direct message and figure out how to get this stuff to you. but that's what we have for Free RPG Day. And if no one collects it, well, I'm going to go to my local gaming shop and see if they want it, or I'm going to give it to my kids and say, here, give this to yourself and or other gaming friends. Or I'll send it to you, Ken.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say no.
Okay.
You can always. I need more gaming stuff. So.
Right. Yeah, it's the funny thing is, for those of you who have watched either Twitch or watched us on YouTube, we've always seen Ken's game room from 90 degrees from where he's sitting now, which has some cool wall art and stuff like that. But we've never seen his actual bookshelf, and that's the bookshelves behind him. And so it's pretty awesome.
I thought to kick off season 3, I would try out the because it's easy to grab stuff. Like occasionally when we're talking, right? Like I got stuff. You never know when you're going to need to reference a crystal skull.
Right.
It's right here.
Right.
Long running Black Razor Guild joke, because occasionally we would have crystal skulls that showed up in the campaign. So
nice. So from the loot locker, we're going to head to our astral hangar bay. And you wanted to tell us about something new out there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I was actually hoping to have a print copy of this in hand, but then the our highlighter died, and so we had to replace the engine. And so gaming books kind of like that might be a September or October thing. We're just gonna I clearly have enough to read without going out and buying additional stuff right now. But in any case, September will arrive, but it's so the new Spelljammer is out. So this is Spelljammer Adventures in Space. It was released on August 16th. I think that was the gaming store release date. I think online it was a little bit later than that. I think they usually do it like a 2-week lead or something. Interestingly, it's a box set. So it has the Astral Adventurer's Guide, which is a 64-page hardcover book, which is like the player's book, the player's handbook for Spelljammer, basically, right? Boo's Astral Menagerie, which Boo being the space hamster from Baldur's Gate, miniature space hamster, miniature giant space hamster from Baldur's Gate.
Right.
So that's a monster book, which I can't wait to get my hands on the monster book because I'm all about the monsters. And then the Light of Xerxes. Okay. It's a 64-page hardcover adventure. It's in the show notes. I'm horrible at pronouncing things, so I'm sure somebody out there can correct me on it. And then there's a double-sided poster map of the Rock of Brawl, which is an asteroid city. I think I remember reading about that one from Spelljammer the first time around. And then it's got like a sturdy 4-panel Dungeon Master screen. So it's a pretty hefty box set. I'm curious to see like how thick the actual box is. Yeah. I always enjoyed Spelljammer. I think the challenge I had with Spelljammer, I don't know that I ever really did any Spelljammer adventures back in the day. Like I think we may have had like a one shot here or there. I liked the concept of it. And I think the thing that Spelljammer struggled with in the past is like it was kind of a meta campaign, right? Like it's how if you wanted to go from Orith in the world of Greyhawk to Terrell in the Forgotten Realms, Spelljamming's how you did it, right? Yep. And so I remember paying attention to Gray Space, which was there were source books that were released for each of the major settings. And so it's like, ooh, Gray Space, we can finally learn about the planets in the system. And it's like, yeah, I don't know that I care. Yeah, so we're never leaving Greyhawk anyway.
I was really deep into either running my own campaign or playing in someone else's homegrown campaign. Like the groups that I ran with, like we might pick up the source material like Greyhawk or whatever, but we would always generate our own game worlds. And right. So Spelljammer just didn't fit into that. At the time they were kind of I think it was still TSR then, was coming out with different things. Like Spelljammer came out a little while later, Planescape came out a little before then, I think, was Dark Sun and stuff like that. And so like, if you wanted to dive into a particular setting, you could, but there were a lot of settings basically. And I think
there were.
And Wizards right now is basically like, oh, it's Forgotten Realms, period. And only now now that D&D 5e is kind of changing thanks to D&D 1 or 1 D&D or whatever
1 D&D
that's coming out. It's kind of like, well, let's put all these other things out there so we can, put them out for 5e or renew the copyright if I want to be cynical about it or, whatever. But, I'm interested in it this time around because it just happens to tickle the right funny bone on me, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and it is kind of goofy. It has its own aesthetic. I don't know that it really appealed to me back in the day. I think back in the day I was much more interested in Dark Sun or trying to like use the slang in Planescape, right? Like Planescape it was very edgy, very 90s, very metal.
Right.
Dark Sun, same, right? Like Dark Sun, like all the covers look like they were ripped from a heavy metal album, right? Like just like it is dark and it is despair and magic will destroy the world.
Right.
Cool. Sign me up. Spelljammer's like bright and shiny.
Yeah, Spelljammer's bright and shiny. You have giant space hamsters and miniature giant space hamsters and all sorts of other weird, and it was like a Saturday morning cartoon. Compared to like a Batman cartoon or something like tonally, it was very different.
It's like back 60s then, Batman versus.
Yes, it was like 60s Batman versus like the Dark Knight or whatever,
right?
Or the Batman animated series or whatever.
Yes, that's where I was going.
Or Justice League. Those are definitely not goofy. Whereas 60s Batman, definitely goofy. But I'm interested in it too. I'm a little disappointed because it happened, and it was probably due to publishing timelines, but like the new Dragonlance has also now been announced.
Yes.
And if you buy Dragonlance, you also get a copy of everything in Dragonlance on D&D Beyond as well. Whereas you do not with Spelljammer.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I was really hoping, because I've kind of gone a lot more in on D&D Beyond. I've really enjoyed when I have run a game or played in a game using it. I've enjoyed how it works. And been able to look up stuff like we're running the Spelljammer game through D&D Beyond.
Right. So do you want to talk about Spelljammer game?
Yeah, let's talk about that Spelljammer game. So Spelljammer Academy is what we're playing. It's on, well, as you just heard, D&D Beyond. So I'm running it with D&D Beyond using, since Spelljammer wasn't out then, people had taken the Unearthed Arcana, like unofficial but probably going to be official rules for the different races that were coming out and put them in as homebrew into D&D Beyond. And so, like Ken is, I believe, an astral elf in there. We have a Thrycreen barbarian, which is just crazy. And a couple, and, I think we have almost every single, character, like new character race represented in this game, because no one wanted to play like a human or something like that. I think the most possibly standard race is a person playing a Kenku, but that's still not.
Yes.
That's like the only non-Spelljammer race that I think is that we have in our entire group. Which is still an unusual species to play. But we're playing with D&D Beyond, and that's been pretty good. The Spelljammer Adventures was released in 4 segments. We've played the first 2 over the course of a month or so. They're not perfect, and I may do like a Seth Skorkowski level of like a standalone episode, like reviewing the module, but also saying, here are the changes that I would make as a GM to help make the module more playable. Cause there's some stuff in there at what point you get into a Spelljammer ship combat. but there was no
Well, I was just gonna say
no ship combat rules, and some other stuff like that. And so it's stuff that I would have expected. And it turns out that I did look up some stuff, and there really isn't much ship combat rules in the actual Spelljammer book. There's some things that, when you pick it up, kind of work, kind of don't. But like, it's free. Like, right. the only thing that I had a problem with was, like, they have a support area, and it appears that the only thing that they really care about in the support area is if there's like a typo or a broken link or something. Because there were some questions, like I asked a question at one point. So slight spoiler. So skip ahead a little bit if you don't want to hear this, but is that you go into a fight. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about it, but you go into a fight on a Spelljammer, and you have some ballistas and a mangonel. A mangonel's like a catapult trebuchet thing.
Right.
And it uses the straight up rules out of D&D for how to run a ballista or a mangonel. Now, we had like 6 people playing, which is a fairly large group. But a ballista takes 3 actions to load, aim, and fire. And so you can have 3 people, each of them saying, hey, we want to load, aim, and fire this weapon in 1 round. Or you can have 1 person over the course of 3 rounds, their entire action being, I want to load it, I want to aim it. Okay, now I want to fire it. That would be utterly boring. The ship has a complement of like 15 or 20 crew, but nowhere in the game does it say that there are crew other than the characters on the ship. And so, and given the situation, there may not have been crew on the ship, or there could be. I ruled that there would be, but it was, and that basically the captain could direct the crew, and I gave them that sort of stuff. But I had asked that question and got 0 response other than from other people saying, well, you could run it this way, or you could run it that way. I was hoping for a bit more of an official answer than what they gave.
Right.
We're going to play session 3 tomorrow. Now that I think about it,
tomorrow
should probably reread the module again. We had to postpone it a couple of times. It's fairly straightforward. I've read it a couple of times already. It's just I should probably brush up on it before tomorrow, before the game.
Sounds like it's prudent.
Yeah. For maps, I've been using Owlbear Rodeo, and that seems to be going pretty well. Even the people who have never used Owlbear Rodeo have picked it up really quickly. But it's not like a super combat heavy module either. But I also use it to like show the handouts or show the NPC portraits and things like that so that everybody can see it easily. So it's been pretty fun. And now that all 4 of them out, I think it's a bit more complete. Like there were not some Spelljammer ship maps in the second portion of the module, but that have now come out in part 2 and part 3 and 4. Unfortunately, if you did not, it was free on D&D Beyond, but only if you signed up while they were releasing all 4 of them.
Oh, okay.
So if you did not, if you got one of them, you got all 4 of them. But if you didn't sign up before that promotional period ended, they're no longer available, unfortunately. So hopefully
they're not even available for. They're not even available for sale. Like it's just.
I don't know if they're going to make them available for sale or not, but they're definitely not available for free. I think it's been an interesting introduction to Spelljammer, and I think the people who are playing it in our game, like you and others, have become more interested in Spelljammer because we have played it. So,
yes, I would say so.
So I think we had one other thing playing over the speakers in the Astral Hangar Bay. What has that been?
Spelljams, which is a Wizards of the Coast released a playlist for Spelljammer. I know like none of the music that is in this list. I don't know any of these bands because I am old. But so everybody go, oh, Magic Sword, yeah, I totally know those guys. Reggie Watts, yeah, he's fantastic. But they've got like, the song titles include things like Seeds of Destruction, Arena of Blood, Space is a Place, Visible Lights, Love is the Disaster, Moon Dancer, Space Fighters. And so it's music to inspire your Spelljammer game. And I always loved running, like when I game in the real world, I don't think I've ever done this online. I know there are ways of doing this. I've just never tried it. Where I'll put together playlists and then run it during my game, to find something that's like thematically appropriate. And certainly during Star Wars, I've forever queued up Star Wars playlists because at this point we have all of the Star Wars music,
Right.
And so it's cool. So I started listening to it at work. I got through like one or two tracks, but unfortunately work's been bunkers with meetings and what have you. So I just haven't had that nice concentrated time where I could just have it on in the background while I'm doing technical reviews and stuff. So check it out. If nothing else, it will give you some inspiration for Spelljammer.
Thanks everybody for listening. If you have feedback, we love feedback. You can send it to podcast@layerofsecrets.com or via Twitter @layerofsecrets. We stream this live on Twitch if you want to get your fix of things early and unedited, and probably a month or so before it actually comes out as a podcast, given our current editing schedule. We're Layer of Secrets, all one word, on Twitch. And you can also visit layerofsecrets.com and leave us feedback, topic ideas, or your own thoughts on what we've talked about. And there's a reminder, if you want some of those free RPG Day books, we will send those out to pretty much first come, first serve, as long as we see the tag on Twitter. If you @Layer of Secrets as part of your post, saying, hey, I'd like that free RPG Day stuff, or Layer of Secrets is an awesome podcast. Any of that works. We'll contact you via DMs and we'll see about getting that out to you. So, but thanks for joining us for season 3, episode 1, and hope to have you all on and seeing us for the rest of season 3.